Welcome to Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. How? Today on the podcast, we explore the magic, wonder, and practicality of permaculture, how you and I can achieve food sovereignty and turn our own backyard into a little Garden of Eden. My guest today, I'm super excited about, is a good friend of mine, Chad Johnson, who is a permaculturalist, okay, and an avant-gardener, big time, and has really been working with permaculture and studying that modality for over 20 years now. Really gotten into nature and how we bring nature into our lives and really how do we create our own ecosystems and that kind of thing. Super excited to have you on the show, Chad. You're out in Montana right now, is that right?
Northern Minnesota.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, sure. But I don't notice that you're talking too much like this, don't you know?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Closer you get to Canada, the more it comes out.
Nice. Sweet. Cool. So I just want to set a little context for our chat today. Part of this comes out of my desire to really invest time and energy in the earth and really recreate our relationship as people to the planet and to nature. And so I wrote a song called The Wells Run Dry, which is about a mining company that's trying to open a mine in my neighborhood. And the bridge of the song is, I think, really critical to the conversation that we're about to have. We're going to check it out, and then we're going to talk. All right? Sound good?
Good, mate.
Yeah.
Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. You might say your mining claim is what everybody needs. Beneath your lying promises is the heart of your greed. We won't let you slip it into the ground beneath our feet. Rape our land of treasures that our people sorely need. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Won't you please do us the decency of not pretending like you care, while you fill our space with toxic waste and contaminate our air. Lose out on memory, pausing in their minds. We will fight for every drop till you abandon all your claims. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. The wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake. Thirsty, wells run dry and the people awake. Wells run dry and the people are thirsty. Wells run dry and the people awake.
Sweet. So yeah, that's a music video that I did. Just a little backstory from me to you, Chad. We moved up to Rough and Ready to get out of Los Angeles and to get into nature. And we bought a place with 3 acres on it of land. We have our own little forest, and we're really intent on cultivating that land and making it viable and resonate with us and just really enhance what's already there, really cultivate that space. That's what we're about. And when I moved there, I found out about this mining company that's trying to open a gold mine in our neighborhood, which would totally wreck the environment. Okay. Because there's asbestos in the rocks that they're trying to dig up, and there would be all kinds of traffic, which is why I left Los Angeles, and all kinds of things that would really be bad for the environment. And the place that I just moved to that I love. And so I wrote that song, and I've gotten really interested and invested in how is it that we and I collectively harmonize and cultivate a relationship with the planet and nature that really supports it. So the bridge of that song goes, it's time to put the planet back to the place where it belongs, the sacred righteous architect of each and every song. Take dominion, exploitation, and greed without remorse. Bring harmony and dignity and honoring our source. And I really feel like that's what you're about. I feel like that's what you have dedicated yourself to, bringing harmony and dignity and honoring our source with the work that you do with permaculture. If you could maybe just start by talking about why it is that you got into permaculture. What's the origin story of Chad Johnson going into this crazy business of avant gardening?
Yeah. And I think we're born with, as children, just a sense of wonder and love of nature. And my mom had me in the garden as a kid. And my neighbor, it was my second mother and my best friend, always had an amazing garden, just chowing on strawberries, just having that relationship maybe you take for granted and then you try to fit into the world, however that box forms. And after becoming a design engineer, I realized that, oh, this is kind of killing my spirit. And I left the job I had, took off without knowing where I was going, and ended up in the redwoods, like a half mile from the ocean in Northern California. And it was a week before 9/11. So I had a little crank up radio. It was solar powered and cranked up. And when I turned it on, it said, and the set towers has gone down. And I was like, is this real? And something hit the Pentagon. And so I'm just kind of, is this really happening? And I was walking out in the trails, which connected me to the rest of the people I was living around at the time, and just told them what was going on. And the conclusion that night at the fire, where everyone would bring a bottle of wine, a guitar, food, and shopping. It was like a celebration every night just to have supper. And that night it was a little more somber. And the conclusion was, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's just do more gardens and greenhouses. And I wasn't even involved in it until then. And so I found a place where the redwoods kind of opened up in the canopy. And I was like, well, right here would be good. It gets enough sunshine. So I opened up the ground, and whatever came out hit me. A massive spiritual, almost psychedelic experience. And I was just sitting there on my knees, just like not knowing what was happening. And at the same time, as I was coming back into the world, it felt like I could feel like these presences around the edge of the redwoods. And I was there for an hour, just sitting there trying to figure out what just happened. And that never left. And that began a whole series of events. You could call it coincidences or whatever else, but it led me down a path where I didn't even realize I was on until I got deep into it.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. So you felt spirits, you saw spirits. Were you on any psychedelics at the time, or was it just?
No,
Okay.
I went to the greatest cannabis place in the world, and I stopped smoking and doing anything. I was down, and I don't know what it is, because I've had other experiences once as a child, and then maybe half a dozen other times. And I don't know if I can say that they're angels, and that it's different. It's very different every time. If it's nature spirits, sometimes entities, it's hard to almost categorize it. It's so different every time too. So
Yeah. Some sort of positive energy force, something guiding you or, yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So just to get this right, you dug a hole in the forest. You started digging because you were working on doing some permaculture in this particular spot in the redwoods.
Yeah. Just starting the garden, first opening up of the ground. And since then, I've found two people that said, oh, they isolated a bacteria, not to reduce it down to the physical, but they said there is something in the ground that can be released they're actually starting to synthesize it and use it for depression and use it for, I think it starts with a V. It's escaping me right now, but they have found things from the ground that create euphoria.
Okay.
When I read what happened with their experiences, I think mine was a little more intense, more like leaving the world or going through the veil or something else. But it's amazing things like that exist. And what else out there that we don't realize exists, you know?
Yeah. And one could posit, I mean, even if you did experience some sort of bacteria that was in the earth that then gave you this euphoric feeling and this experience of entities or angels or whatever, positive energies, even if that's the case, what led you to dig the hole in the ground where you did? Is that coincidence? I don't know. Maybe. But for me, as I like to say, I choose to believe things if they are empowering to me and they help me empower myself and others around me. I don't know if anything is real, quite frankly. You could be a figment of my imagination, Chad Johnson. I know that's awkward to hear, but
You think?
yeah, or vice versa. So anyway, that's really a beautiful story. So that led you to continue the journey of doing permaculture. Talk a little bit about what permaculture is and how it is that you develop a sustainable permaculture in your garden or in the earth, wherever you are.
So the word permaculture came about in the early 70s. David Holmgren and Bill Mollison from Australia came up with it. And it's really just a modern version of working with nature in harmony and putting together, you could say, different systems or just wise things to do that have benefit. And it's actually rooted in ancient, but we have all this modern technology. And so I see it keeps advancing. If you want to grow something, it's nice to grow it close to your home. It's nice when you don't have to take care of it as much too. And that it's something that draws you outside, brings you closer into your surroundings, into nature, so that you have this outer living room type feeling so that you want to be out there more. And when you're out there, you start to have these different experiences. I was just out in the garden with my son and we ate like a dozen different things as we're just walking and talking. So you're actually changing even your diet, but you're also breathing in the hormones and different things that leaves and compounds and even the things that are behind nature that we don't see, just like I was telling you that story. We're here for this soul journey. But I think it's easy to see the dark things in the world in front of us. It's presented to us all the time. But I think the hierarchies that have our back are kind of like our wings. So they're kind of got our backs and we don't see them as much, but I think it's always there. And we're definitely in changing times. So it's very interesting to see what I can see is the culture. Almost there's a slow demolition and a slow morphine of, you can say people waking up or just the changes that are happening, but I don't think it's all up to us to figure it out. I think these have got our back still and are going to be like here for that soul journey.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I look at agriculture and our history and how we've risen from the Industrial Revolution and then the giant agribusiness to what we have now, which is giant agribusiness cartel, where we're really just injecting the earth with things that are not natural, fertilizers and mass producing things and like overproducing things. And then that causes all kinds of problems, even to the extent of you look at countries where people are starving in Africa. So much of that is because they're unable to sell their corn at market that they took all this time growing because agribusiness has dumped all of their crops into the market, so they can't survive on the land that is around them. And the awakening point of the rest of us in seeing that is upon us. You know what I mean? There's transparency. There's the internet. You can tell that's what's going on. That this overconsumptive model, it just doesn't serve the earth and our surroundings. And certainly with what's going on with the warming of the planet, et cetera, there's plenty of evidence that we are actually fucking it up. I also agree with you and see where this waking up point is happening. And what I think is really fascinating about it is that you talk about that these are really ancient models of just caring for the land and being in touch with nature and inhaling the compounds that are there. It's just like whenever I water the garden, I immediately smell the earth and I get this, I feel like the plants are happy and there's something changes within me that makes me much happier in whatever disposition I might have before watering. So what I find really interesting is this return to the ancient wisdom. And then also coupling that with using the technology that we have developed to really create a paradise for nature, really good environment. So I'd love for you to talk about what that looks like. I'd love to hear like a little bit about the philosophy of like how it is that you look at the land and care for the land. And then also how it is that you use modern technology to assist that.
That's a good question, because what we now have in our hands with the connectivity and the technology is a forward escape that would open up the possibilities beyond what we can imagine, beyond what I can imagine, because what I've seen, the response from my system has gone way beyond what I could have imagined. It was in my wildest dreams, and it can take many forms. But what we can achieve in days, ancient civilizations, generations.
Wow. And so what do you mean by that? What can we achieve in days and how do we use that? And then comparatively, what were the ancient civilizations doing that took so freaking long? You know what I mean? Poor guys. Feel bad for our ancestors. They were patient. And they didn't live as long. It's crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, we see the bones of civilizations. The pyramids probably weren't built in the desert, and the Fertile Crescent probably wasn't a desert either. It's where most of our domesticated animals that we know of came from.
Yeah.
So when we look at these, or when you look at nature, really what is coming through these four elements is you can tell the vibrancy or the life, or even just the feeling or the spirit of a place. And water is the blood of the earth. So water is life, but if you want to think of it as our civilization or culture, you can say that water is our capital. Modern farming typically is getting rid of the water in spring, whether it's the snow melt or the spring rains, so that they can get the heavy equipment, the tractor, to plow. And it's what our building and agriculture is, what is the wisdom that our culture is based on. It's what everything is based on, but it's a complete mystery to us. When you look at what works or the remnants of these food forests, you can start to get a glimmer of the wisdom that is still there. Except now, for the first time that we know of, these millions of different varieties are coming to us. So these sentinels, these beings that we are eating or feeding are coming into our scope. And just give you an example, I have hundreds of different varieties and 9 different kinds of kiwi. And I'm in Minnesota. So that would have seemed bizarre before, but now it's becoming something you can go get at your local nursery.
I see. So that's part of what the design is. In other words, you're able to cultivate and grow plants that you want to, that might come from traditionally from other parts of the planet that would have taken generations to get across because some bird carried over when they were migrating or what have you. And you're able to cultivate it because that's part of what you want to create in your ecosystem.
And even the bigger part of that is to imagine what you would think of paradise like. But when you get down to the actual designing of it, is you're harvesting three-dimensionally the sunlight and the water.
Wow. That's a brilliant thought. Harvesting three-dimensionally the sunlight and the water. Go on.
It is part of the ancient technology because you look at terraces, and besides even terraces, think of it as earth forms or naturescaping, because the shape does not have to be this linear terrace. Although when you take the flat ground and now you bring it up, suddenly the result is something that you could write a book about. You have all the different aspects. You have perfect drainage. But also the earth becomes a sponge. And so it becomes living because the water is being held in it like a sponge. And so it can charge up with water, especially like over a year, it'll charge up with water. I'll have worms 5-10 feet down and I'll keep going and they're still down there. So those become your plows. So your tractor now becomes either the worms or even pigs. In the beginning, I've used a shovel to do my ponds or the terraces or earth forms. But in the end, to do it with heavy equipment is like the greatest thing and the quickest change you could do, where you can easily have food sovereignty in a day. It's not about a food shortage. It's about kind of a knowledge shortage, or the climate change that needs to take place is like between our ears, where it's just like we need to listen. You can read your own nature or you can read your surrounding nature. And these are like the two temples. And when you create your day-to-day into a nature-scaped paradise, and you can do this in your backyard, you can do this in your community, that you start to change your moments. And so it starts to change us. So I feel like it's a seed in the culture. Like biodynamics was planted by Rudolf Steiner 100 years ago. And now we just see that is all coming out. And people are like, whoa, the wisdom of the stars. And that's why they created the zodiac, which was this ancient Mazzaroth, which even physicians would know to work with people's health, or the dynamics of what goes on in the ground. We see these celestial bodies. It's the earth, moon, sun, stars, and they have an influence on us and the earth. And so we see the sap, so we see the seasons, and there's these pulses and rhythms that we understood. And now we're time in a culture where we're coming out and it's like we're just waking up. And so you're waking up, and what I see with the change in nature or the information or inspiration or ideas or knowledge, I'm a strong believer that we don't enter our bodies and we are connected to these sources. And they come through us as vessels because either we prepared ourselves or they have come through. And what I see is massive downloads coming through just with the plants themselves. They seem to be coming out of nowhere to me because I thought I'd seen everything. I have a friend he was writing a book called Bizarre Edibles, and he was the Indiana Jones of the plant world. And now this has turned into 11 volumes that will be coming out because right now it's at 11, because the species keep popping out of nowhere. We can design with the earth. You can design something that creates your own paradise. And that's one of the dreaming or imagination techniques you can do is, what is your dream or what does paradise look like?
That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, you start talking about downloading information that we're definitely getting into the more spiritual territory. All right. Sorry, people. That's just how it goes. I mean, why do we dream when we sleep? There's a lot of mysteries going on. What I think is really interesting is that you're really listening to those voices and accepting those ideas and thought patterns as like things that are critically important. So I have a couple questions. One is, when you say that we're able to download more, we're able to like really tap into things, what is that experience like for you?
A lot of it will come out of what you could call the mistakes or not so great results. A deer eats your tree.
Okay.
or it eats many of your trees. How many trees do you have to lose before you're like, but that one made it?
Right.
That was a set of epiphanies where you can steer nature and still feed nature, and nature will give back to you like many more times than you could imagine. So it's greater than, you could say, 100% efficiency. If you want to get into what that would be, is that you can do something in nature and it will give you back 10,000% and your grandchildren.
Wow. That's great. So I'd like to also know, you mentioned one can achieve food sovereignty in a day using modern technology and equipment. Take us through, like, what would that look like? How is it that, like, for me personally, I have land. We have a garden already that's kind of set up with beds, and we have zucchini growing and a bunch of different vegetables, which is amazing. We came to this house that had it already set up. But there's hillsides on our land that I would like to cultivate, maybe make into terraces and that kind of thing. So how does one do that? How does one achieve food sovereignty in a day? And if you were to just grab a person's piece of land and tell them what to do, what would be the process that they go through?
I started with a shovel. You can do it that way. If you wanted to do it in a day, the easiest thing that I could see would be you're rolling out. They make rolls of cardboard. You can roll this over grass or whatever area you're going to cultivate and put the soil on top and surround it by wood chips and inoculate the wood chips, because this is your raised bed. Inoculate those wood chips with mushrooms. And then you plant out the soil. And by the next year, the grass or whatever was growing there will have died away and the seed bank is too deep to come up. And this is not the technique I do, but it's the one that I've seen that is the simplest for our culture and available, where people could do it quickly. But the concept of wood chips going into what would be considered the dump and suddenly becoming the underground internet with mushrooms, because mushrooms do many things that are outside of our scope of vision that we don't see. And so it connects the underground. They're sending out information and nutrients to the surrounding landscape. I really recommend wine caps, which is also known as garden giant or King Stropharia. That is the powerhouse of mushrooms. And the way it creates soil and the way it will get your surrounding nature talking. And it's like a steak in butter and salt, and you suddenly have a juicy steak. And it's a beautiful mushroom that's also got water retention benefits. And it's sending out like the neurons in our brain when we're thinking or inspired or imagining. Those neurons that are moving around are in the soil too. They're in the underground, the living earth, except it's not confined by the skull. So that's where that talking comes in, but it doesn't mean we're not connected. But mushrooms does that to a degree that like nothing else. And mushrooms are a lot closer to human beings in their makeup than plants are. The spore is typically one cell, so it's super small, the seed. And it's the most electrically dense thing we know on Earth besides metals, except it's living. So when a storm comes in and you feel the air pressure lift up, now the first raindrops coming onto the mushroom cap are like the drums. So that water drum is releasing these one cell spores that are going into an atmosphere that's now getting very light. And as that drumming's going on, it can release spores by the millions. And when you have a living earth, now these charges, neurons, hydrogen ions, and life and everything else can all go right up into that upper water channel, the clouds. And so it returns to the water. And what happens is that electrical field that goes up, surrounded by magnetic fields like a toroid, brings all those one cell electrically dense spores riding up into who knows where, the ionosphere or into the elves or the upper storms. And what I heard from Terence McKenna was like they are galactic travelers because they can have the escape velocity to leave. So we may have part of our cultural change coming just through the spores that are still riding in the ionosphere. I've had animals, plants, birds, insects come to my garden that I don't even recognize anymore, because you create a habitat and nature will fill that void with life. It'll fill it with the best life. So when you create it, one of my epiphanies was to come back off my farm after 7 years was to share this with the world. You're going out and you're going to see the culture with this knowledge now. I did not see that coming, except you're going to make it for human habitat so people can live in it. After that lightning comes in, that idea, that rumbling of the thunder is what shakes the underground. And these connections we had, these one cell filaments, the mycorrhizal, get shaken and disrupted enough to where now it resprouts back into the underground apple tree. And what comes up is the new flush of mushrooms.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there with that whole thing. First of all, and you talk about this a lot, but what I think is one of the most fascinating, I suppose, discoveries of modern times, and maybe they knew it long ago, is the fungi network. That fungus is with us all the time. It's there when we are born. It's what eats us when we die and decompose into the earth. It is like a communication network under the soil that allows the trees and nature to communicate with each other. And now it's the natural kind of internet, right? And now we're finally really able to not necessarily tap into exactly what's going on with that, but we're able to recognize that it's there and that there is a higher communication going on, and it's really undeniable, and that it exists, and that we can also cultivate that, which I think is really fascinating. Now you start talking about mushrooms doing intergalactic travel, and I'm like, what's he talking? He's talking like there's mushroom aliens. Is that what's happening? Is that what's going on? That's also fascinating as well, because really you're not just speaking sort of from like a woo-woo spiritual perspective. You're talking about actual cells and actual spores that are being released up into the atmosphere and then are being sent up into the clouds and who knows beyond that, and that they're alive. And because they're communicating, there must be some sort of consciousness that is present with that fungi that we don't completely understand. So I think all of that's really fascinating. You also say your mission really became clear to you, that your job now that you've achieved paradise for yourself, right? You got a little Garden of Eden in your backyard, don't you, Chad?
Surrounded.
Yeah. And so now your job is to really cultivate that and bring that wisdom to other people. Are there like core tenets or things that you think are critically important for people to understand as far as how they begin the journey of cultivating that kind of paradise for themselves?
Yeah, the dreaming imagination part, that reconnecting with nature, listening to nature, reading nature. What my main mentor would say is you're reading the book of nature. So if someone says, what book do I read? You could say, well, read the book of nature. I thought it was a cop-out at first. And I thought, well, that doesn't answer my question. But later on, I was like, oh, you really need to spend time out there and you're going to get all the answers in the world. And it might not be the answers you were looking for or you expected, but it's going to talk back to you. So nature will respond to you positively. If you do something more positive, like you're harvesting all the water and sunlight, it'll respond even more positively. And so if you do something negative, it'll respond negatively. There's really no rules or recipes too much beyond that, but there's practices you can do creating these earth forms and planting them out that you're going to have your own epiphanies. And just to give you an idea, you can create these earth forms in your own little paradise in your backyard, where you take the flat ground, let's say, and you bring it to the outside. And if you've gone up 6 feet, now you've gone down 6+ feet in here, And what you have is like a water catch system. So this is giving you a model to give you an idea beyond your typical maybe garden that you'd normally see, except now you have all the different aspects and you have the water catch feature. So your irrigation becomes the design. The design even becomes the fence. I plant thorny things, what I call thorny barriers, on tops of these to help steer the deer. Because I have deer, bears, wolves, birds, groundhogs, all either passing through or living in the garden. I have predator and prey in the garden, and they don't touch my chickens or ducks because there's plenty of food in their natural system for them. They'll be very close and they won't go after them.
Wow, that's incredible. And so you dig a trough, like a 6-foot trough, into the earth.
You dig a bowl, let's say, and this is just one design. Let's say you dig a bowl and you get to hang out down there and you put your swinging bench, or if it's a pond down there, the frogs will move in and the insects that move in. You don't even have to be too close to water. When I dug my first pond, the next day I had frogs and turtles and I didn't have water nearby. So that's, again, nature kind of filling. It's almost like they know, or do they know, or who is letting them know or guiding them? So I feel like that's a little bit of the journey I'm on, where I said I didn't know until I was halfway down the path that I was on a path and getting to these different destination spots. But you can create, let's say it's your backyard and you create either a terrace that's 6 feet or you go up another 5, 6 feet. You're not even going to know you're in a city if you are in a city, because you're going to be down there. You're going to be buffered sight and sound wise by nature, and whatever birds or frogs or crickets are going on, you can really transform something in the city to something totally different.
Wow.
And just talking to you now, I'm getting these visions of, oh, I could go create something right in the middle of the city. And people would probably be like, where did this come from?
Yeah. Would you please?
Yeah. I'll meet you in Chicago.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a plan. Seriously. I'm into it. Yeah. I mean, what's so beautiful about that, I got chills when you started talking about it, because it's like going back to the beginning of our discussion, take dominion, exploitation, and greed without remorse, bring harmony and dignity in honoring our source. What built the city is the dominion, is the idea that we are above nature. We need to control our environment. That's what a city is. I'm not making cities wrong. Okay. It's part of our history and who we are, and people live in cities, et cetera. But there is a separation from nature with all the concrete that we've built and all the buildings and et cetera, where we're just disconnected. And what you're suggesting and pointing to is it's a personal revolutionary act where people can really craft their environment and take what they have in this city and really reintegrate nature into their life and into their surrounding. So I think that's beautiful. The other thing that came to mind for me is we lived in Los Angeles. We lived in Playa del Rey, and there's a buzz about that city. There's a lot of, I don't know, whatever interference going on, whether it's just people or who knows, just energies. That the city of LA, I love it though I do. Okay. For me, there's just a lot of like very hard to focus and feel connected. And I used to run very often. I would do like a 3 to 5 mile run. And there's a wetlands preserve that was right by our house where we lived. And you could jump this little fence. Sorry, people, I did it. Okay. And guess what? I'd do it again. And run through this wetlands preserve that's just full of all these birds and animals and turtles, and like in the middle, in the heart of Los Angeles and Playa del Rey. And immediately, as soon as I jumped the fence, it was just like all the noise disappeared. All the sounds disappeared. And now I'm tapped into nature. I'm feeling nature. I'm feeling connected to the earth that I'm running on. And I'm breathing because I'm oxygenating myself so much more. And I had so many, those runs were a real source of me deepening my connection to nature, and also my connection to source, and also a huge source of inspiration for me. I mean, I wrote a lot of songs running on these trails and other things, because now I'm listening. Now I'm hearing the nature that surrounds me and really tapping into that. So I really appreciate this whole concept that we have it, that I think there's a misconception in our culture that it's impossible to like create some sort of Eden or paradise in my own backyard. Forget it. I'm at my cousin's house right now. He has a very small backyard, but it's big enough. And you're pointing to experiment with what you have, like really dig, sit in nature, feed the plants, create a system that you design, that you really dream up. And so that's beautiful. How is it that, I mean, this is going to sound silly, but how is it that you do this Imagineering? How is it that do you just walk out into your backyard and sit and meditate and do some deep breaths and close your eyes? Or what's the actual brass tacks of it?
A lot of it is going out into the space, because when you're out there, you can start to get the ideas. And I learned from Sepulcher from Austria. And that's where What is Your Dream? What does paradise look like? One of his books his last book was Desert or Paradise, which if I was going to recommend a book, I'd recommend that. I think it's like it went from $29 to $120 or something crazy. I don't think, maybe they'll reprint it. The other one is Sepulcher's Permaculture, which I think is just as good, but for whatever reason, it's not as expensive. Maybe they printed more of them. If you imagine what you love, and it can be by sight, sound, engage all your senses, a place you want to revel in, so that you can get into the space of, these are my moments on earth that are precious, and how do I want to spend them? By myself or with loved ones and family and the whole thing. Do I want to have people over for dinners? Do I want to have a meditation spot? Do I want to have all of it layered over each other so that I have rich experiences? And let's say that we're sitting on something and we're even in the water up to here. So we're sitting in the water together, Geoff, and I'm going to reach over and grab you a peach or a bunch of grapes or an edible flower, stuff it with a bunch of berries. And we're going to chomp together, and then we'll be like, oh, what does paradise look like? We're like, I have no idea.
I really love this idea of we're sitting in your backyard and you're feeding me grapes and we're talking about what's next. Okay.
And then we're swimming. Yeah.
Are you wearing a tutu?
I can be.
Okay. Now we're in business. That's great. So that's beautiful. That's really, whatever it is, there's not like a how-to manual here. It's really just listen to the forest, listen to the ground that's around you. And it's kind of this reminiscent of this ancient Taoist idea.
It was in our ancient cultures, and now we have the opportunity to have our culture reborn with all the technologies. So what's at our fingertips was not available before. And a lot of the plants weren't available, but also this ancient know-how of creating these living models as teachers and creating practitioners and paradises to go beyond our lifetime is now, you can do it in a day. What we did at Aubrey and Kyle's, we did pretty quickly, and now they want to go to the next level, which was the major download. So I typically will go to someone's land for...
Let's just back up there for a second to give a little context. Aubrey is Aubrey Marcus from the Aubrey Marcus podcast, and Kyle is his partner, your partner also, in cultivating this land. And they live down in Austin, Texas.
Oh, thanks. That's good context, because I didn't know who these people were, but 30 seconds into talking to Kyle, I knew that the vision lined up. I knew that it was the right person to be talking to, even if I had to go to a McDonald's parking lot to talk to somebody. When I had the inspiration or the idea came through, it was a week later, a guy from Florida called and said, hey, I heard you're out doing something amazing. Can I come and film it? And everything cascaded after that. So this inspiration or idea to come out after 7 years was almost like a whisper of saying, by the way, you're not only leaving, but everything's going to be set up for you to make this happen. It has been pretty effortless. It's been just the creative side of me coming out, doing what I love to do. And the right people are contacting me.
Yeah. Okay. So that's fascinating. So that's how you connected with Aubrey. Was he discovered you through somebody doing a filming at your garden?
Kyle saw that video and he said, that's what I want.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool.
And he was just looking around, and someone said, well, you should look at this guy from Florida who's food forests. And then he pointed him to me and said, this is the guy you actually want to talk to. And I should say when Sepp Holzer came on his first U.S. installation, he's coming from a mile up in the Alps. So he was unknown to the permaculture world, which is very interesting. I was there, and anybody that had Sepp Holzer on their radar at the time, 10 years ago, was there. So there's about 100 of us. And on the last day, we presented our designs, and he said, "This is your new designer." And I came up with a pretty wild design, and he took me under his wing. Leading up to all those things, when I look back on the path of these destinations or opportunities I've had, it makes a lot more sense to me now, to where going on to Kyle's land or all these other properties now that I'm starting to see, it's making a lot more sense to me. Because a lot of this, I was like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. But I think it's the right time in our culture too. It's totally available to us. So when you look at what's going on in the world, or you could say the complex problems that are happening, all that can be solved in a garden, and the world can disappear, or everything can be reimagined. And you can be reimagined, because I did not see myself being in the place that I'm in right now. And when people can actually experience these, besides even just seeing a picture or a video I could show you, to actually walk through and inhabit and engage all your senses and to eat in it and to revel in it with other people, is the destination. I couldn't have imagined these if I hadn't been in, even though I had already seen some of them, walking into Sepp's paradise, because he's in a place a mile up in the Alps where it gets around 35 below, and he's growing lemon trees outside with lemons on it. Just to give you an idea of the mastery of microclimates and what's possible, that's always more than you can imagine. And someone said even the word impossible, if you look at how it's spelled, it says I'm possible.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's great. I do want to tap in a little bit to the Sepp Holzer connection, because I didn't realize you guys were tight. So he kind of took you under his wing and showed you the ways.
Yeah, the land I'm on now fell through 6 months before I worked with him. And I'd worked on that for 1.5 years, because it was the only piece of land I ever saw that I was ever like, I would love to live there. And on the last day, when I showed him my design, he took me off to the side. Everyone else went with his other students. And he was just talking about the world and nature. And I didn't know what he was doing. And his students said, "Well, Chad, when people start working with Sepp Holzer, a lot of the land comes to them. So that farm that fell through, maybe that was just supposed to happen." An hour, maybe 2 hours after that, the lady that said she wasn't going to sell it to me called me up while I was there that day and said, "I'm ready to sell to you, and now it's half price."
Wow.
Even Sepp's place, he acquired the land around him. And what he says, he's in a spruce desert. So to expound on the sound of music, the government planted just a monoculture of spruce, which created landslides. It didn't create the habitat for nature. And here's Sepp in the middle of that, but also acquiring his neighbor's land. It's on land that they'd say it's too marginal to farm. It's not good enough land. But he's up there and created over 70 ponds with over 30 different kinds of fish, over 30 different kinds of mushrooms, and animals that are from pythons to rare birds to buffalo to everything else. Crayfish is one of his biggest sellers.
Crawfish?
And you see this crawfish.
He has crawfish in the Alps.
Yeah. Crawfish outsell everything else combined that he's doing.
Wow.
And so he mastered that, and he kind of went through talking about how you can create the greatest habitat for crawfish. And so you can raise and lower the levels of these ponds too. So when you want to go in and harvest some of the fish, he's putting them in the aquarium and driving them to the restaurant so that they have live fish for the customers to see. And he gets a premium price for systems that he doesn't have to even manage as much as you would a field of corn, let's say.
Wow.
He's the one that taught me that worms and pigs can be your plows, because they're making and creating channels for the water and channels for roots and bringing up minerals. That's the worms, not the pigs, but they can do that. That's where he got a lot of his pond inspiration, was from the pigs. So yeah, creating the water in your landscape, but your biggest water feature is actually the land, is earth. So you're creating the earth to be your decentralized water retention landscape. So we centralize things like power in our culture. We centralize things in money, like in a central bank, or we centralize water into reservoirs and with dams. But when we decentralize it, and you think of dissolving barriers, that is what is available to us. And you can do this. He's done it in the Sahara Desert. I just did it on the edge of the Mojave Desert for the Mennonites who had dairy camels. They just had an exodus from Michigan and are in California. Their next move might be going into Mexico, but they're in a place that only gets 7 inches of rain a year. And last I talked to them, they said they have more water than they need even. So they have plenty of water. So if water is life, water is the life of your system, you can do it anywhere on Earth.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I love this idea that the problems of the world can be solved in the garden.
Bill Mollison, he has more of a quote that he has, but that's where that comes from. There's other quotes. What's another one? Oh, permaculture is revolution disguised as gardening.
Wow, that's great. That is beautiful. Awesome. Well, that's great. I think that's actually really a good place for us to kind of wrap it up here. I just want to say I feel I've learned so much from this conversation, and you really have opened a lot of doorways in my mind of what's possible and what I can do with my own land and what we as a culture can do. And I really just want to appreciate you and your path. And I know you feel that you've been guided, but you allowed yourself to be guided. So I just really want to honor you and thank you for taking this on as your mission in life. And I want to come visit. All right. I'm coming up there to whatever it's called, Spirit Rock or whatever, and in Minnesota. I mean, I guess I should probably be talking like this, coming up there to Minnesota to see ya. And
yeah, you bet. It's really nice reconnecting with you too, Geoff.
Yeah, right on. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. I'll keep you posted on when this comes out, and I'm really stoked about where this conversation has taken us. So thank you so much, Chad. Much love.
Yeah, much love, Geoff.
Thank you so much for listening to Lunacy. Please leave a review and make sure that you're subscribed. If you'd like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/Lunacy podcast. Lunacy was created by me, Geoff Eido, and is edited and created podcast management production. Okay. Thank you for listening to Lunacy. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, go to If you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/Lunacy podcast. Lunacy was created by me, Geoff Eido, with podcast management and production by Kimberly Joy Voice, LLC. Thanks for listening. To listen to Wells Run Dry and all of my music releases, please go to Spotify and search Geoff Eido, Geoffeido. You can also see the music videos on YouTube, same name.